الحمد لله الحمد لله خالق الوجود من العدم وجاعل النور من الظلم ومخرج الصبر من الألم وملقي التوبة على الندم ونشكره على المصائب كما نشكره على النعم والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم بعد قول أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا. My dear brothers and sisters, we are living in a crazy world. We are living in a world that is extremely confusing. Since the dawn of human civilization, since the time of Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, we have never seen a world that is so demoralized. We have never seen a world that is so confused. We have never seen a world that is more skeptical than the 21st century that we are living in. We are living in the age of immorality, immaturity, and immodesty. We are living in an age where people are questioning the very basic of reality. People are confused on what gender is. They're confused about what a man is and what a woman is. We are living in the age of liberalism, feminism, LGBTQ activism, and other postmodern philosophies that have poisoned the minds of the youth. Subhanallah. Now, when we analyze these philosophies, when we look into LGBTQ activism, when we analyze the ideology of LGBTQ activism, when we look into feminism, when we look into the different waves of feminism, the first wave of feminism, the second wave of feminism, the third wave of feminism, the fourth wave of feminism, the fifth wave of feminism, the zero wave of feminism, when we look into the politics of feminism, when we look into liberalism, when we look into classical liberalism, and we look into modern liberalism, when we look into these postmodern philosophies, we find that these philosophies are rooted in ideology called as atheism. It is rooted in atheism. So what is atheism? It's a very, very important question. And very sadly, atheism, it is spreading like wildfire. It is spreading like wildfire. There are youth who come to me for counseling and they say, I don't believe in a God, and their name is Muhammad, Ahmad, Khadija, and Fatima. They say that Islam is misogynistic. They say that Islam is against women. They say that Islam is a religion of war. It's a religion of vengeance. So we are living in an age of confusion. People are really confused on what Islam really is. And the root of the confusion is really from atheism. Now, when we look into the field of atheism, what is atheism? It's a very, very important question we should be asking ourselves. What is the root of atheism? The best way to basically deal with these philosophies, to give them the good answers that we can give from the epistemology and ontology of Islam, is basically by studying what atheism really is. Now, when we look into atheism, they come up with different arguments. They ask us questions like, does God exist? And if God exists, what is the evidence for the existence of God? They come to us and they ask us questions like, you're Muslims. Look at Gaza. Look at Palestine. Look at Yemen. Look at Iraq. Look at Libya. Look at Iran. Look into these different Arab countries and you see Muslim suffering. You see Muslim suffering in Uyghur. You see Muslim suffering in South Africa. You see Muslim suffering in France. You see Muslim suffering across the world. So if your God is a merciful God, then why does evil exist? That's a very prominent question they ask. If everything was created by God, then who created God? If God is so powerful, can He make or create a stone that He can't lift? And they come up with these different kinds of questions. And we very clearly see what? We very clearly see that atheists, even though they come up with these arguments, we look into these arguments, we dissect these arguments, we critically analyze these arguments, and we find that none of these arguments have core. None of these arguments have water. There's basically long words with half-baked logic. They don't make any sense. They don't have any rationality. They don't have any logic. and they don't have any dalil, they don't have any evidence. Atheism is literally a socio-geopolitical cancer. It's a psychological poison, it's a philosophical trap, and it's a path to the complete destruction of the traditional society. So if it is really poisonous, if it is really toxic, the next question is, why is atheism still spreading? Why is atheism spreading if it is so senseless, if it is so purposeless, if it is so meaningless, if it doesn't have rationality? Why are our youth jumping into atheism? That's a very important and powerful question we should be asking, because in reality, atheism is weak, it is meek, it does not have any foundational basis. Now, what can we do to counter this poisonous ideology? The answer is simple. The answer is simple. It is through education. It is through awareness. It is by understanding what atheism really is. So what is atheism? According to Julian Baggini, he defines atheism as a claim that says there is no God or gods. That is the lexical definition of atheism. Now, atheists come and say that this argument of atheism, or this philosophy of atheism, or this ideology of atheism is scientific. Is it a really scientific claim? Is atheism a scientific disposition? Absolutely not. And a lot of people, a lot of atheists, the young generation, they come and they say, what? They say, we are atheists because we are believers in science. We are atheists because we have scientific temper. But does science really say there is no God? Does science say that? Absolutely not. Science does not even deal with the question of divinity. Science does not even deal with the question of God, because science is based on methodological naturalism. Science is based on methodological naturalism. It is not concerned about the question of why. And atheism is based on philosophical naturalism. A lot of atheists, they don't realize this reality. Now, the question is then, why does it seem like a lot of people who are attached with the scientific field, academicians, researchers, professors, and scientists, they look like they're atheists? Why is it so? It is a false narrative. It is a false narrative. Can I ask you a question? Does science and religion coexist? Can science and religion coexist? If you ask this question to an atheist, you know what they're going to say? They're going to say no. Science and religion cannot coexist. But in reality, when we look into the field of science, the development of science, we very clearly see that scientific development, it is rooted in scientists who are religious. Most of the scientific discoveries, or most of the scientists across history, were actually believers in God. When you read a book written by Alan Flew, it is titled, A God Exists. In the book, he says that most of the scientists across history, in Mesopotamian civilization, in Chinese civilization, in Japanese civilization, in Indian civilization, in Islamic civilization, in Greek civilization, they were all believers in a higher power regardless of their religion. Regardless of their religion. Most of the scientific discoveries today that we see in the world are rooted in the Islamic discoveries that happened in Islamic civilization. Dr. Jim al-Khalili, in his book, Islamic Science Saved the Western Civilization, he very clearly proves this fact. Then why is there a narrative that says that atheists are the guardians of science? Why is it? The answer is brainwashing. The answer is disinformation campaign. Because if you really look into history, you clearly see that atheists were actually one of the people who pulled back science hundreds of years. What happened in Soviet Russia after 1917? After 1917, when Soviet Russia was established, they established a philosophy called as Lysenkoism. And Lysenkoism is a materialistic, dialectical, atheistic, communist philosophy that basically attacked scientists. They killed, butchered, discriminated, marginalized, segregated over 3,000 scientists. Why? Because these scientists believed in theory of relativity. Because they believed in the Big Bang theory. Because they came up with arguments for resonance theory in chemistry. And all of these theories had metaphysical indications or inferences. Subhanallah. So saying that religion is against science is also an argument that does not have any water. In fact, if you talk to a lot of these atheists, they act like they're intellectuals. They act like they have a lot of arguments. While in reality, if you talk to them directly, you find that they have no rational, no logical, no intellectual arguments, but they come up with emotional arguments. I remember a time 2 years ago when I was in a debate in Cortical with an atheist. He came up with questions and I gave him answers for each of the questions. He asked questions on feminism, on liberalism. He started questioning different aspects of Islam. And when I answered all of his questions, he was still reluctant to believe in Islam. And I started counseling him from a psychological perspective. And I found out that his sister, he has a young sister who is 13 years old, and his sister is paralyzed. And then he is questioning in his mind, my young innocent sister who is 13 years old, what has she really done to be a victim of this? And he started questioning God, and he hates God. And I asked him, even if God exists, would you really believe in God? Would you really worship in God? And you know what he said to me? He said, I will not. So the problem is not intellectual. The problem is not rational. The problem is not logical. The problem is not epistemological. The problem is not ontological. The problem is not methodological, but the problem is psychological. It is emotional. It holds no intellectual content whatsoever. Atheism today is not an intellectual movement. Atheism today is an emotional, social, political movement. That's the first point we need to understand. So why is atheism spreading today? To answer that question, we need to look into the context of 21st century. We've got to look into the context of 21st century. Now, when we look into history, history can be divided into three parts. Pre-modern history, modern history, and post-modern history. Now, pre-modern history is basically the era before Enlightenment. Before the Enlightenment. Before 16th or 17th century. Now, what happened in the European countries in 16th and 17th century? It was ruled by Christian missionaries. It was ruled by Christian Catholics. It was ruled by the Christian power sources, and Christian power structures were basically against reason. They gave no space or opportunity for scientific endeavor or scientific temperament. And in 16th or 17th century in Europe, you see a fight between Christianity and reason. And they're trying to reconcile between reason and revolution. Martin Luther, who is basically the founder of Protestant theology, he claimed that reason is nothing but a whore. That's what he said. And apologies for the straightforward language. That's how he looked at reason. And Christianity was against reason, so much so that Thomas Aquinas, he tried to reconcile between reason and revelation, and he was not able to. When he looked into Christianity, the Trinitarian philosophy of Christianity, he saw that reason cannot reconcile with Christian theology. That's the conclusion he came to. At the same time when this was going, there was this scientific revolution. People discovering things. People with scientific endeavor, people with scientific temper, they started fighting against Christianity. They started calling themselves as free thinkers. They started calling themselves as free thinkers. This is where we see the development of atheism as a socio-political movement. If you look into history, you never see atheism as a movement. You can see individual atheists, but unlike the 21st century, in which we are having atheistic organizations, this was not present in history. The reason why we have movements starts from the Renaissance era. The next reason why we have atheism as a movement today is because of French Revolution. French Revolution, their main motto was liberty, fraternity, and equality. And they tried for the propagation of this ideology that was focused on individualism. And this is where liberalism basically starts to flower. Now, according to the classical liberal theories, they were so focused on individual freedom and individual independence that they started seeing religion as a prison. And they said that if you truly want to be free, if you truly want to be independent, you've got to come out of the shackles, the prison of religion. And this was the main ideology that was deeply embedded in the classical liberal traditions. The next reason for the development of atheism and materialism was basically scientism. People started saying that science determines the absolute reality. If you have any question, the first answer you look into is basically from the field of science. But they don't understand that science does not determine the entire reality. With scientific endeavor, with scientific methodology, you will not be able to comprehend complete reality. Now, scientism is another philosophy that is also extremely dangerous. And along with that, we see the rise of industrial revolution in Europe. And through industrial revolution, we see the rise of hedonism. They were looking for advancement. They were looking for the development of the entire world. And for that to happen, they have to come out of shackles. They have to come out of rules, and they have to come out of regulations. And for that, they started spreading the atheistic ideology. There's a lot to explain here, but I'll keep it brief due to the shortness of time. Now, in Industrial Revolution, in Europe, there started a lot of advancements in technology. And that led to the rise of hedonism. Now, what is hedonism? Hedonism is basically the pursuit of pleasure, sensual self-indulgence. Their only philosophy in life is basically to get pleasure, to gain pleasure, to find happiness. You can engage in anything, whether it's halal or haram, whether it's wrong or right, as long as it gives you that sensual pleasure. And this also led to an exponential rise in atheistic philosophy. And these hedonists, they don't have a moral code. They really don't have a morality. And this is also one of the biggest problems of atheists. One of the biggest problems of atheists. They don't have a moral code. They don't have a moral code. In Islam, we have objective morality, while in atheism, we see subjective morality, which does not have any basic. And therefore, they jump into nihilism. What is nihilism? Nihilism is a belief in nothing. Nihilism is purposelessness. Nihilism is a philosophy that says that your life has no meaning. And when people come into that, they start to get into depression. They start to getting into chronic mental health problems. I was doing case analysis in a hospital. It's a neuropsychiatric hyper-specialty hospital in Bangalore. And I was talking with a neuropsychiatrist, a hyper-specialist. She's been in the field of psychiatry for 16 years. And she says very clearly, and I quote, that due to the development of atheism, due to the development of hedonism, due to the acceptance of materialism, she has seen an exponential rise in mental health problems. In mental health problems. After COVID-19, we are having a mental health crisis. And its root can be seen in atheism. Almost all of the problems that we see in the 21st century, whether it's liberal filth, whether it's modern feministic filth, whether it's whatever ideological filth that we're talking about, it is rooted in two. It is atheism and materialism. So we got to really understand how to oppose these atheists, how to counter their toxic and poisonous theories. It is extremely important. And they say something. They say that we don't worship any God, we don't worship Brahma, we don't worship the Buddha, we don't worship the nature, we don't worship Allah, we don't worship Zeus, we don't worship any Greek gods, we are free and independent. But in reality, if you look into the lives of these atheists, you very clearly see that they worship who? They worship themselves. They worship themselves. And it points to the verse in the Holy Quran, which goes, Allah has created all human beings and jinn illa liya'budun, except to worship Him. And that aspect of worship and ubudiyya, it is deeply rooted in the inherent psychology of a human being. If you don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will definitely worship your desires. You will definitely worship ideologies. You will definitely worship philosophies. You will become a slave. You'll be shackled into the materialistic physical world, and your needs are just going to be biological. And these atheists, that's exactly what we see them doing. If you read the book written by Ayn Rand, it's titled The Fountainhead. In that book, she very clearly shows how atheists and liberals and these feminists, they worship themselves, while they say that they're independent from the worship of God Almighty. So my dear brothers and sisters, the final conclusive point I would like to bring forth is the fact that atheism, even though some of its arguments, it looks intellectual, it looks logical, it looks rational, it looks epistemological, in reality, it holds no water. That's why I repeat, atheism is nothing but a sociological cancer. It's a psychological poison. It's a philosophical trap. It's a political weapon. It's a path to the complete dissolution and destruction of the entire humanity. Atheism is nothing but a wolf in sheep's clothing. Atheism is nothing but nothing but truth packaged, or lie packaged as a truth. So be very critical. Be very logical. Do not be blind believers. Question, as Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah once said, istadil wa'taqid. Look for dalil, look for evidence, and then believe. We are not blind believers. Oppose atheism, oppose liberalism, oppose feminism, oppose these postmodern philosophies with intellect. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to do that. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.